Alright, welcome back to painting Dave the Dwarf. Of course, Dave is the fighter in the party of the campaign that we're currently playing. And Dave is coming along pretty well. Today we're going to be working on the hair, and a little bit of a challenge because of the sculpt in both pros and cons. So as you can see, there's a lot of texture sculpted into this miniature, which is great to have good detail. However, it also makes it a challenge to get in and paint nice and evenly. So we're going to speed it up. Now, at first I thought about doing it in grays. So the player for Dave is not really given a lot of indications what color hair or anything like that. And of course, I'm pretty old school and thought about doing kind of the Tolkien-esque grays and whites, almost a salt and pepper. But with the armor all around, I wanted to bold up the colors a little bit. So we're going to go for kind of a chestnut highlighted up into ash blonde. I think it'll look good and really stand out against the armor. And just going through and framing. I apologize, I see that the video is cutting in and out as I move around and move my hand. This is basically just outlining the areas of paint. So we want to get as close to the skin and the armor as possible, but that detail does make it very challenging just to get in and get all the little nooks and crannies. And of course the shield doesn't help. It's such an odd angle to get that side when the miniatures are holding shields. The shields definitely work to give them partial cover. And the color that I'm starting out with is the base color, which is just a chestnut brown. And then we'll go through and do a wash to darken it up. So Dave, in the campaign, the party now has gone through a few levels up. So they're currently level 4. And Dave continues to be just the front heavy hitter. Changed out his long sword for a great axe and is able to kind of plow through. Now I'm reconsidering whether or not I change out that sword blade. Of course, because it's softer metal, this is a pewter metal from Reaper. You can see the blade has quite a bit of bending to it. I didn't straighten it out before we started primering and painting just because I had considered switching it out. But the hilt I really like. I like the details to it. So I'm probably going to, at some point, just straighten out the blade and give it the paint job. But we've only got a couple more videos left for Dave before we move on. Painting the hair and beard here before we do the gold accents on the armor, the helmet, and the sword. And then we'll really only have the shield and the detail work to do. So it's coming along really well. And here you can see just lots of struggling getting into those nooks and crannies. With these sculpts, when they're so detailed out, like I said, they look fantastic and they give you a lot of opportunity to do highlighting and really have that heroic dynamic posing and painting. For just tabletop use, they can be a little challenging. And this is not a commission or a competition entry. This is just a gift for the player. But I still like to do a good job, so it's not a super fast paint job, but a decently quick paint job. So Dave recently has started to use some of his feats, his class features in combat using action surges. Of course, we play D&D 5e, and it's kind of nice to see, of course, after the player characters get to 3rd level and beyond, they have more features and abilities that they can use. In our last game, it came in really handy as they went hunting for a cataplebius, and unfortunately my miniature for the cataplebius was not ready to go, so I wasn't able to use it on the map for the players, but we used a stand-in that worked okay. And again, the player hasn't given a whole lot of colored details, but with the favorite color being orange, you can see by the base all the players' favorite colors get painted around the base, so they're easy to track on the game mat, as well as easy for me to tie in colors, with orange being kind of the favored color. That's partly why I went with this chestnut paint scheme. It's because it does go into reds, browns, so kind of an orangey tone. Thought it would work out really well to tie in that orange color, and again stand out really well from the armor. And these paints here are lightly watered down, so I used basically 4 drops out of the bottle and 1 drop of water, so a 4-to-1 ratio. That helps get them into the nooks and crannies, but it doesn't keep it so thin that it runs, because as we're edging along the hair and the beard, we don't want that paint to run into areas that we've already painted. So that's why these later videos take a little bit longer, because you do have to be much more careful with how you're applying the paint to make sure that you're not messing up previous layers of paint and having to go back and redo those. So trying to be as careful as possible and just give it a real good even coat that's fairly thin but not transparent thin, and just looking for nice clean edging. Again, this is going to sit right along the armor and the face, so we want it to be nice and a clean even break. But looking pretty good. We'll let that dry out, and then we'll start to put on the wash. And for the wash, we're going to use just a really deep brown, and this is a red brown. And the ratio to this is 1 drop of the paint and 10 drops of water. So definitely much thinner. And here you really have to be careful on the edging, because you don't want that to go into the skin. While it does provide a little bit of dark lining, you really have to be careful that it doesn't overrun. And the camera angle, again, I apologize. I know it's challenging to keep it in focus when my hand is closer to the camera. But just breezing through. Of course, we've sped this up so that you don't have to sit and watch me paint for 15 minutes. And getting all the wash in. And because this is a thin coat, we've got to set it down and let it dry. And then the shade of it was okay, but I wanted it even darker in some of the recesses. So I'm going to apply just a second coat of that dark wash. I want those deep red browns to be really dark. So we're just going to use the same exact wash and just do a second coat. And I actually missed an area. You'll see it later in the video where I had to go in and put on some of the wash on the miniature's right side, the left side of the camera, kind of tucked in a bit. but just doing another wash so we get real good deep dark shadows. Of course, because the color is red browns, it doesn't have a whole ton of contrast, so we've really got to make those shadows as deep as possible. That way the transitions have a little bit more highlight, even though it's going to be in the same family color. If you're using different colors, you can get those illusions of transitions or depth and light a little bit easier. But because these are in the same color family, you've really got to pay attention to the darkest darks you can get for the shadows. And then here we're just touching up that chestnut brown again. So the chestnut brown that was put down first and then coated with the 2 washes is darker, just because of the wash going into the pigment. So this is just going to bring those colors up a little bit. We're going to be picking out some of the individual hairs just because of the sculpt. Now if these were more smoothed sculpts, then we would just paint kind of patches and have some roughed edges to give kind of the illusion of independent hair clumps, I guess is the best way to put it. But because of this dynamic sculpt, we're able to pick out a lot of the single hairs and groupings of hair pretty easily. And just going through and putting on some of the original base color back in so that we've got a good base separated from the shadow tonally that we can highlight to. So in our next session, we're going to be following the group as they go back to complete a quest provided to them by a gnome of exploring crypts beneath a ruin. It's going to be interesting to see how Dave goes through and kind of clears this out. Of course, we'll have the session before this video goes live, so I'm not super worried about it. But there are a couple of creatures that, if they roll well, could be pretty overwhelming for the characters. And Dave, being kind of that heavy hitter, is definitely going to come into play in a big way. So I'm looking forward to him using, again, some of his action surges, using some of his shielding ability with his heavy armor and shield. I mean, he is definitely the tank, so he can take a lot of hits or attempted hits without getting hit. So we'll see if he uses some of the natural choke points and kind of blocks the way. Does a little bit of 300 action, and it's kind of what I'm expecting. But we'll see. So the coloring here, again, I kind of started to second guess myself, but thinking back into the reds, the red palettes into oranges, I think it's going to play out okay. And as we get through these lighter colors, you'll see we start blending this chestnut with a light brown, and this will start giving more variation, more light tones, getting it ready for that kind of sandy blonde look or ash blonde look. So highlighting, continuing, just doing smaller and smaller portions. And painting hair can be a challenge. I've found, depending on the sculpt, whether or not they're wearing, like in this case, a helmet, or if they've just got hair on their head, making sure that the shadows are near the deepest point. So we'll only highlight away from the helmet, and then in the beard and mustache we'll do high points, so anywhere the light would be striking, as well as the tips. And that's pretty natural. Tips on beards and mustaches and hair, for that matter, is generally going to be lighter than what you see at the roots or in the midsection of the hair. So that's kind of the shading or highlighting technique that we're going to be using on this mini. And I think it comes out pretty decent, especially for tabletop use. I think the tones and colors are nice and easy to see the highlighted points when you're in a gaming situation and you've got the miniature on the map. And again, because the colors I want to tie back into the player's favorite, I think it'll work pretty good. And make Dave the Dwarf not appear like an ancient dwarf or a super old dwarf. Because when we started this campaign, all of the player characters started at level 1. So I don't expect them to be middle-aged or older miniatures. So we want to definitely keep some youth to the miniatures. And again, once we start playing in person again, each of the players is going to be gifted their miniature. They are most welcome to use these on the map, or they can provide their own if they've got a preference of a miniature that better represents their character. Starting to do more and more of the highlights. So at this point we're starting to blend in tans with the lighter browns and just really hitting the edging where that light is going to be hitting the most. Again, just really calling out the high points. And this gives us the illusion of more organic hair with the kind of tonal changes from red browns into yellow browns. And those tonal changes definitely, the video doesn't really do it justice here. In person, it looks a lot more organic, and yeah, the video here just doesn't do it justice. But this is Dave the Dwarf with now luscious locks and a beard that would make any dwarf proud. Thanks for watching our video. We hope you enjoyed it, hope it was enlightening and informative. Here's another video we think you may enjoy. Make sure you hit the subscribe button to help us grow. Remember, we launch new videos every week to try to help you answer the question of where will your adventures take you.